Welcome to today's webinar where we'll be talking about best practices in blended learning. We're excited to share this topic with you today, but first we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. My name is Mary Carnahan, and I'm the eLearning Resource Specialist with the Indiana Department of Education, and I'll be your host and producer for the webinar today. As you joined the meeting today, you connected to the audio, but I have muted all the lines except for our presenters. Please keep your line muted throughout the call so we don't have the distractions of background noise. On the right side of your screen, you should see the chat box that will be open and available to you throughout the webinar today, and you're encouraged to ask our presenters questions or share ideas of your own. Also, please introduce yourself if you haven't already so that others on the call know who you are and might be able to connect with you later. For this webinar, you'll get one PGP, and I'll be sending those certificates out to all of the participants tomorrow, so look for that in your email. I am also recording this webinar, and it will be posted early next week on our YouTube channel, and I hope to share that link here in the chat in just a little bit. You can view all of our previous webinars there, so if there's something that you're interested in, you might be able to find that topic covered in one of our recorded webinars. This webinar is part of our professional development, the opportunities that we offer. We typically have monthly webinars, and our next one is scheduled for September 17th. And we're really excited to have representatives from Munster High School who will be on the call to talk about their school-wide PBL project, Project Green. Watch Twitter and our website for more webinars to be announced soon. Well, we also have a Twitter handle that we hope that you're using and following, #INELearn. We encourage you to use that hashtag when you tweet on a regular basis to connect with other educators around the state and around the country. We have weekly INELearn chats, and the next one is this coming Thursday. Our guest moderator will be Heather Lister, who is an Indiana Connected Educator Conference Spotlight speaker. She's going to be leading a chat on equity and inclusiveness in makerspaces, so plan to join that conversation at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central this Thursday night. Let's move on to our topic for today. We're happy to have Diana Gill and Tiffany Copple as our presenters today for this webinar. I'm going to turn the mic over to them, let them introduce themselves, and start our discussion on blended learning.
I think we can advance slides. All right, this is a pretty pink slide. All right. And then Tiffany and I, of course, made our own cute little intro slides. There we go. Hello, I am Diana Gill. I am the Director of Technology for East Porter County School Corporation in Northwest Indiana. You can find me on Twitter at Diana R. Gill. A little bit of background, I formerly was an English teacher, high school English teacher, turned technology coach for 4 years, now serving as Director of Technology. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, my name is Tiffany, and it is a really long title, Instruction, Programming, Assessment, and Data Specialist. I also provide support for e-learning in the elementary schools, and I work for Scott County School District 2, which is in southern Indiana. You can find me on Twitter at Keith_Copple. And my background is pretty varied. I've taught elementary. I spent 10 years in various grade levels in the elementary, and then I moved to the middle school and taught 4 years there with 6th and 7th graders, a digital literacy course, and some STEM. And then this year I moved into this new role, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys today and to discuss blended learning.
Awesome. So our goals for today are kind of really specific topics inside of the larger topic of blended learning. And so I'm sure today we'll kind of touch on the the basics of blended learning and some different blended learning models. But really, we wanted to spend today getting into some really specific conversations. And that kind of assumes that our listeners have somewhat of a working knowledge of what blended learning is. But if not, feel free to ask questions or reach out to us after this webinar. We're happy. I know Tiffany and I and Mary are always happy to connect and help out any way we can. So today I'm going to focus mainly on video instruction and how that fits into all blended and online classrooms. So first, I think we can head to the next slide, please. Thank you. First, I want to talk about, why are we looking at instructional videos, specifically creating our own instructional videos for use in our blended learning classrooms, how we can get started on that, what are some best practices for designing video instruction, some strategies and tools that you can use, and then ultimately how to package that so it's most successful in whatever blended learning environment you've created for your students. So why audio and video, and specifically why, when there's so much out there, should we spend some time looking at how to create our own audio and video to embed inside of our blended learning content? And when I first started designing blended activities, I always I felt like this was the right thing to do, but at first I didn't really know why. And so I started doing some research on whether or not that was even something that I should invest my time in. And I found this awesome white paper from Obsidian Learning that was published in 2017. It's called Transforming Learning Using Video for Cognitive, Emotional, and Social Engagement. And reading that white paper and that research really solidified the ideas that I had about why it was so important to not only use video, but to use the video that you created for your students. And really what this comes down to, if we can click slides, I need like a motion or like a secret word to move on. Thank you, Mary. Really what this comes down to is just good online design in general. Whether you're designing in a brick and mortar classroom or completely online, good online design really takes into consideration designing for personality and for interactivity. And so, designing with personality in mind not only includes your student's personality, but yours as well as a teacher. Designing with emotion, taking advantage of those relationships that you have with your students. So whether you're in a brick and mortar environment or completely online, all teaching, all good teaching leverages those relationships that you've built with students in the learning. And so just like in brick and mortar classrooms, we use relationships to connect with students. Those relationships should also be present in online learning. And when you, as a brick and mortar teacher, move your instruction to an online space, those relationships should be visible too. And so video can help us do all of these things that I'm talking about, designing with personality and interactivity in mind. It also helps you be as close to the learning as you can. And a lot of times, and when we're talking about blended learning, online learning, e-learning days, as we like to talk about in Indiana, the question that we get a lot is, how can I make sure this is authentic, that it's more than just this, digital worksheet situation? And this comes with designing with personality and interactivity because it makes you, the teacher, closer to the learning, and that kind of does two things. It provides a level of authenticity, and it also helps us avoid academic dishonesty. Melissa, yeah, that white paper is incredible. Again, it's by Obsidian Learning, Transforming Learning Using Video for Cognitive, Emotional, and Social Engagement. You can find that at Obsidian Learning, and I've got some information on that in my slides coming up here. So all of my research comes from that white paper. So let's talk a little bit more about the why and the research of why this matters so much. So cognitive learning theories are developed from what we know about our cognitive limitations. And in this white paper, Timothy Spencer and Stephen Victor write about the cognitive theory of multimedia learning specifically. And basically, what that theory says is that we learn more effectively from words and pictures than from words alone. And especially when those words and those pictures are happening simultaneously. What better vehicle to make that happen than a video that you've created? And so from there, Richard Mayer developed 12 principles in response to this. So how do I make this happen? And the ones that are relevant to our conversation tonight are the ones I'm going to try to outline for you. The first is redundancy. We know that we learn better from graphics and narration than from graphics, narration, and printed text. So this kind of speaks to cognitive overload. You don't want to put too much on your video, right? We want to make sure that we're reading, we're providing the information in a way that's going to best help our students take what they're learning in their working memory and put it into their long-term memory. And so we focus on graphics and narration only in our video. We don't need all of that. And what that really means is that, when we're designing online content and we include a video, we might also include a lot of that information in text form as well, and that's not necessary. So the video can be powerful enough to stand alone for that instruction piece. And UDL folks out there might be thinking, well, is that accessible if I don't include text? One of the things you can do is upload all of your video content to YouTube and take advantage of those automatic closed captions and transcripts that YouTube provides for creators. Awesome tool as well. Okay, modality. We know that we learn more deeply from pictures and spoken words than from pictures and printed words. Again, a video is the perfect vehicle for this. Personalization. We learn better from multimedia when words are conversational. We see the narrator as a partner and make a stronger effort to understand. And this really speaks to the humanistic approach of teaching and building upon those relationships. We know that we learn better when narration is spoken with a friendly human voice. Your students know you, you know your students. Leverage that when you're creating video content. Okay, so video is one way to put all of these things that we're talking about inside of our online and blended content. So how does this fit into the blended learning environment? One of our goals with blended learning and the power of blended learning is basically, we're able to duplicate ourselves in a blended learning environment, and it allows us as humans to spend more time with our students because that other content can help us reach other students at the same time. And so quickly, before we start to talk about the nuts and bolts of the videos, I want to spend just a brief couple of minutes talking about different blended learning environments so that you can, we know we're talking about the power of our own creative videos. What do these environments look like and how video has a place in your blended learning classroom, no matter what kind of blended learning brand you've started to use. So we know that blended learning, by definition, is really offering students choice over pace, delivery, and content. One way to get started with blended learning, and I think this is a really great entry point, is with station rotation, because station rotation is really nothing new to education. It's something that we've been doing for years, so we add a digital component to it. And what's great about station rotation is that you can really make it teacher directed before you're kind of ready to give students more autonomy in that environment. So think about an example of station rotation with video content. You divide your class into groups of 3, and each station lasts 15 minutes or whatever, depending on your content area and the grade your students are in. And one station has an interactive video. Your students are sitting there watching a video that you made. You're delivering a lesson. And then there might be another station where you're sitting with students doing some direct instruction. And then the third station, your students are working on a collaborative activity together. One example. And now I want to be clear that I'm not saying that all of your blended content has to be a video. that you make, of course, but video definitely is a way to kind of hit a lot of these really important items of research we're talking about tonight. Another example to try is a whole group rotation, and this essentially is when an entire group moves to an online space. So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all in one class period either. I know some secondary teachers who do whole group rotations over the course of several days. And so maybe day one, you're doing some direct instruction. Day two, the entire class is working on a digital platform, getting in some instruction from you while you pull small groups out to work independently and do some workshops like that. Flipped learning, when the instruction takes place off campus, and then when you're together, you're working on application and practice. So this is a really great way. I've seen a lot of math teachers specifically in my district have success getting started with flipped learning. And a great way to get started that doesn't feel very overwhelming is just to simply record your lessons live as you're teaching them with your students. And then maybe you provide those lessons that you're recording, maybe with a document camera or something, on your LMS so that students can use them for extra practice. It helps parents help out with the math work at home, or really great for absent students. And then in the future, now you have this great package that you can edit and chunk and use in a different way without extra effort up front. It's a great way to get started. And so finally, we'll talk about things that are a little more, provide more freedom to the students, flex options, choice boards, or one-stop differentiated. So this is kind of when students decide when they move. Online learning is really the backbone. Instead of moving in groups, students might move more fluidly and independently. One-stop differentiated is where all the students are really working with the same content, but the delivery method might be different. So maybe I've got two groups, and one group is learning the content from the instructional video that I've created, and they're working on something practice offline independently, but then I'm also providing that same content to a small group of students so they're able to rely on that small group instruction and on me more specifically. And this one's really based on your student needs. So data, whatever that means to you, should definitely be something that you consider when you're making these decisions on how to set your blended learning up. And then choice boards, where student agency really leads. So think about playlists, menus. Students have lots of different choices and options there. So, you know, with all of this said, it doesn't really matter which of these you pick. And in fact, when I deliver blended, I do a lot of blended professional development in my role. So when I decide to create something like this, I don't think, oh, I'm going to make a station rotation today. You know, most of the time when we deliver blended content, it doesn't fit cleanly into one of these things, and that's totally okay. So here's a station rotation example that I shared just to say that, you know, it doesn't have to be anything crazy fancy. This is just a simple Google Doc with a table in it that tells my, you know, teachers which group they're in, and it has all the content they need for the different stations that they're moving through. And it's silly, it has a theme. I had some fun with the video instruction stuff, but it's a simple Google Doc. And so it doesn't have to be this like crazy elaborate thing. It just needs to be functional. And sometimes when we try to make it crazy fancy, we end up making it harder for our students to access. Another thing too to think about is how all of the topics we're talking about tonight really have a place in our classroom, not only in you know, thinking about a brick and mortar blended learning environment, but think about how great video instruction can be for a day that you're out of the classroom or our e-learning days. It's also a great way to get started. You know, like maybe you're not ready to think, wow, I'm not going to make a video for every blended lesson I ever use, but I know I'm going to be out on this one day and I'm going to try something new there to see if I can get back some of that instructional time that I might have missed out on if I'm gone for a day. All right. So I'll share that when I first started making videos for my classroom, I would seriously make it like 50 times because I was using freemium products and I didn't have editing tools and stuff. So I would use like Screencastify and I would make the thing 50 times and I would start over because I just wanted it to be really perfect. And I got over that real quick when I saw how much time I was spending. And it doesn't really matter if it's perfect, it just needs to be you, right? So I'll say, just jump in. Don't let the idea of being perfect cause you to not make that jump in making your own videos if you haven't started that already. So I want to share a couple of different ways to get started. So before you think of making larger instructional videos that really are delivering important content to your students, think about a couple of different ways that you can make some little mini videos for either just-in-time learning or as a way to introduce a lesson or provide objectives or learning instructions for the day. So maybe instead of starting with a numbered list of the things that your students need to do as part of a station rotation or an e-learning day or whatever, maybe they watch a video of you explaining what the learning objectives are for that day. Or maybe as your students work through a hyperdoc or a module in your LMS, when there is something important that you need to share with them, maybe there's a 15, 20-second little video of you or an audio recording of you that delivers what your students need to know right then. And if you are someone who, I know a lot of people here tonight do a lot of professional development, a really great thing to do is start to incorporate some of this stuff into your PD. So a lot of times I'll have like my Bitmoji that has a link to an audio file, and we'll share some just-in-time information with the staff depending on what we're talking about. And that people always freak out about that, and then they'll ask how to do it so they can do it for their students. So just think about little micro videos you could do to embed into your content for those two different reasons. So let's talk about some tools to get this accomplished. This one is called MSQRD or Masquerade, depending on if you are iOS or Android. And hat tip to Chris Young and Mark Painter for sharing this app out in their Teach Like a Student session. I think Chris Young is on this webinar right now with us. But I love this one because it provides you with a bunch of different fun filters. And so in this example, that's me with a mustache and a hat, and it's just a quick video of me talking about the instruction. So like if I were to be giving a video instruction that's like 5 minutes long and a little bit more serious, I'm probably not going to put a mustache and a hat on because that could be a little distracting. But here I am designing with personality and the relationship that I have with my students and being a little silly to make it more engaging and to be interactive. So this is a great app to try out for little videos like that. Another one that I use a lot, and it's not really made for this, but it works really well. So Snapchat, Instagram, or Facebook, I'll get on Facebook Messenger. They have some great filters, and I will record a video with a filter, and I'll just save it to my phone, send it to my account at school, and then I can embed that into my LMS or my hyperslides or whatever it is I'm creating. And so in this example, here are some just-in-time learning videos. It was a module on copyright in the classroom, and so here I am pretending to be Dr. Katie Copyright, and when it matters to the online learning, I'll jump in with my little bubble above my head and give a quick 15, 20-second piece of information that's helpful just right in that moment. And, I also have a teacher who uses this for a Middle Ages unit, and she becomes a fire-breathing dragon. And she doesn't use this in a way to present any information specific to the curriculum. She does it as a way to remind her students of procedural things. Don't forget to press submit in Google Classroom, that sort of stuff. And when I talk about this with teachers, I've had a couple people be like, well, that's not my personality. I don't want to be a fire-breathing dragon in my online content. That's okay. I'm not saying be silly for the sake of being silly. Just be who you are. That's okay. To have fun with this. The next one is Voki. And, I have a couple of teachers who I work with who say, okay, I believe in having my voice on my content, but I'm not quite ready to put my face out there yet. So what are some things I can do instead of having my face in my videos? Voki is a great tool. You can make a little avatar that talks. And so this is Copyright Cat. He gets angry when you don't use MLA format, and he reminds you how to do that as you work through your papers. Flaberize is another fun one. This is an example of my dog, Walter. I made him sing the school fight song. But you can take any sort of picture and make the mouth move. So maybe you find a picture of like a DNA double helix, I think that's how you say it, and you put some eyes on it in Google Drawings, and you make a little mouth on him, and you make him talk so that when your students are going through a particular unit in your, it would be biology class, right? In your biology class, then the DNA superhelix will come out and give you some information. So to do some of these things that I'm talking about without necessarily having your face in it, to talk about some online voice recording, I really love onlinevoicerecorder.com because it's free. You don't have to have an account at all, and it actually lets you do some really great edits. So if you like the idea of taking the Bitmoji and hyperlinking an audio file on it, or just doing some simple audio files at first as a way to get started with this sort of thing, this is a great option. And we know that Google Slides has insert audio options now. And so before, the way that I do it is I save the audio file, I upload it to my Google Drive, I get the shareable link, and then I hyperlink it in my stuff. Those of you that have insert audio on Google Slides, lucky you, I'm jealous, but you can do this a lot more easily now. So if you are designing, I talk about Google a lot because we're Google apps and Google Classroom School, but all of these things I'm sharing are you're completely able to do them in whatever learning management system you have. So some pro tips for audio recording. Do not simply narrate everything you type. That can actually make it harder for students to decide what's important and retain information. Start with the visual media and the audio media first. So when you are designing your blended content, your digital content for your blended activities, put in your audio recordings first. Put in your digital media, your videos first. That way your text, you can kind of avoid being redundant there and only putting the text in that's super essential to what your content needs to have, so you're not overloading your students. And then I will challenge you, if you're like, yeah, audio seems like a really good way to get started with some of these things we're talking about, do not let it prevent your face from ever being present in your online content. At some point, you got to put yourself out there. Okay, so getting to actual instructional videos after you've spent some time getting started with those just-in-time videos, or maybe using videos as a way to provide instructions or learning objectives, we can use instructional videos to demonstrate concepts, introduce concepts, review, hook your students, deliver micro lectures, invite them to learn, do some exploration, reinforce a concept, start a discussion. Sorry, it's early in the year. My teacher chops are a little weak. So tonight, I'm going to focus on just 3 types of instructional videos to think about. The first is a talking head video, and that's simply you in front of a camera recording yourself. Maybe you can do that and make it fun by using a green screen. So you might be giving a lecture on biomes or introducing what biomes are, and in the background you can take a trip to all of the different biomes of the world by using a green screen. Again, it doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be simply you talking to your students. But when you're ready, take it to the next level. That's one thing to keep in mind. Screencasts are another great way to get started with digital content. So screencasts are digital content plus your voice. Really great for tutorials. So imagine, you're showing students how to do something on your screen. The screencast tool, whatever you're using, is recording what's happening on your screen, but also your voice and maybe even your face if you leave your camera on. So when I first started doing this, I had a ton of Google Slides presentations and tons of PowerPoint presentations. So I just started by pulling up something I would have delivered in class, using one of those presentation tools, Prezi, whatever, sitting down, going through those things and talking through them, recording it all the while, and then I have this package I can use to flip, or I could chunk it into 3 smaller videos and use inside of my online modules, that sort of thing. Now, I mentioned that if you're doing screencasts, you could decide to leave your webcam on and have your face on that content as well. I will say that there's a debate about this. So some people say, yeah, do that, get your face in there at some point, and that's sort of the camp that I'm in. And others might say, yeah, but what about cognitive overload? Why do I need the teacher's face in there? So total transparency, just something to keep in mind. There are kind of 2 different viewpoints on whether or not to leave your camera on. And then finally, document cameras. Back to this idea that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we don't have to make it crazy fancy. We can rely on the things that we have access to and have had access to for some time, and just use it in let it work in a different function. So how can you leverage a document camera with software or screen recording software to record and capture what you're doing with your students? And so we'll have some teachers do that live, like I mentioned earlier. Others will sit down with their document camera and record a lesson during their prep or while they're alone, and then insert that into their digital content, whatever way makes sense. So some tools to get these things accomplished. Screencastify is definitely a cult favorite. Freemium and paid options available. Very user-friendly, saves to your Google Drive, that sort of thing. So if you haven't tried Screencastify out, it's a great option. There's tons of Screencast-O-Matic, lots of things that do this. Record your screen. WeVideo. I love WeVideo because it's a tool that does all of the stuff I'm talking about. So it's sort of like an answer to iMovie. If you have iMovie, same kind of thing. I love WeVideo because you can do the talking head videos with green screens. You can do your screencasts with your digital content and your voice. You can it has a whole editing suite, and it's really collaborative too. You can have your students working in collaboration on a video project. So it makes sense to me, to use whatever tool to create your own videos that you would give to your students for them to make their video projects. If you haven't checked out WeVideo, there's free versions and paid version as well. And then finally, Loom. Loom is screen recording software that is insanely user-friendly. It's got the screen recording and the webcam, and the free version also gives you some minor editing tools. So this is the one that I use if I'm doing a quick tutorial. I want to show someone how to do something quickly, and I don't want to spend a lot of time editing. I'll sit down, I'll use Loom. It gives me a quick link to shoot out to the people who need it. Lots of people love Loom. And then finally, again, keeping it simple with the document camera. I am absolutely obsessed with my IPEVO. I spelled it wrong in this presentation. It's IPEVO. Yeah, I spelled it wrong. IPEVO document camera. It is a little tiny guy who folds up and is portable. It plugs into my laptop or my Chromebook or my desktop computer just with a USB. It comes with software that does tons of stuff. You can make stop motion videos. And it's a great way to create some online content. So IPEVO, don't go out and buy one. Ask your school about it. They're super affordable and just really, really awesome. All right, let's wrap it up with a couple of things to think about. So when you are creating your videos, best practices tell us to keep it short, to chunk our content. That's easier for students to, we want to avoid that overload, and we also want to help them move that working memory to long-term memory. And so we can do that by chunking our content. Even if I sit down and record my whole lesson and it's 25 minutes, that doesn't mean I have to deliver all 25 minutes to my students at a time. Maybe I cut that into 3 chunks and split it up by providing some practice or activities, interactivity in between there, so they're not just sitting for that length of time. And I must say that I read that in 2015, the average length of someone watching a single online video was 2 minutes and 42 seconds. And knowing my own children and how they use YouTube, that seems like a long time to me. So just keep that in mind when we are designing our digital content with video. Another thing we can do is include graphic organizers. Graphic organizers help us decode and help us with that memory. And then we also know through the theory of multimedia learning that spoken narration and visuals simultaneously is what helps our students make the most out of that video content. So talking about time recommendations, there's no magic bullet here. I'll just say, again, keep it as short as you can, and if it's not short, definitely chunk it. Obsidian, that white paper that I've been talking about tonight, would recommend that the introductions or brief overviews, 1 to 3 minutes. Big picture, more substantial learning, 2 to 5 minutes. If you're really doing a deep dive into something, 5 to 15 minutes, and then a full module might be 15 minutes or more. Again, keep in mind the age of your students there too. So you've done all of these things, you have this video. Now how do you make sure that it's successful after you consider where it's going to go in your blended environment? The last question you have to ask yourself is, well, there's lots of questions to ask yourself, but I'm only supposed to be talking about 30 minutes, and I'm already over. Sorry, Tiffany. What do you do with this thing? So how are you going to package it so that you're considering, most importantly, that student to content interaction? So how can your students apply what they're learning in your instructional video, and how are you going to have them interact with that content? Will you design a hyperslide, put it in a Google Doc or a HyperDoc? Is it going to be part of a Google Drawing with some activities embedded? Edpuzzle is an amazing tool to accomplish this. For our e-learning and our blended learning, that's probably the #1 tool that we use with video instruction, because it stops, asks questions, lets students respond. Oh, cool. Tiffany's going to talk about Edpuzzle in a little bit, so I'll stop. Google Forms, you can accomplish something similar, asking questions, getting some feedback from students after they watch a video that you put into your form. Maybe you set up an entire module in Google Sites, or maybe you've got a module that provides opportunities for interactivity in Google Classroom or your LMS. So as you design your videos, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I would love to chat more about video and blended learning, because I'm very passionate about it. And Tiffany, you're up.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Thanks, Di. That's a lot of great information. And now that I'm creating modules for teachers, professional development modules, that gave me some great information for adults as well. So I'm really excited about that. I hope everybody got what you were looking for there. We're going to talk, we're going to switch gears just a little bit, and we're going to talk about another big piece of blended learning, and as you work to incorporate that into your classroom environment or your school environment, which is assessment. And assessment is big for blended learning, because you are spending, in a lot of ways, you're spending a lot of really great quality time with students in small groups or one-on-one, but there are also going to be a lot of times where they are working on their own. with some of the content, maybe the videos that you've created or the content that you've delivered to them to study and to work with, or creating their projects. And you need to have good ways to stay connected to your students and continually assessing them so that you're able to provide the instruction that they need so that they can be successful. And so really we're going to be looking more at formative types of assessments in your classrooms, and we'll take a look at just lots of different ways and thoughts and tips and tools as we work through this, and I'll do my best to get through it all in the time that we have left. Go ahead and advance for me. Okay, so just some questions to consider as you're looking at assessment in a blended classroom. What are your expectations for online assessments? Are they similar or different from face-to-face assessment? So, you know, I think of this when I taught first grade and I was doing fluency checks with my students. When I went to more of a flex station rotation in my first grade classroom, I still continue to do one-on-one fluency checks with my students once a week. But each day I was having students also do fluency checks with a video tool as part of one of their stations. And so you have to think, what are my expectations for that? And you not just what are your expectations, but how are you conveying those expectations for students? Okay, boys and girls, if you're going to do a fluency check on your own, we're going to practice that. We're going to model that together, and this is what I want that to look like, and we don't want it to be a silly video. And so you're really kind of setting some of those expectations. But what are you really wanting from that assessment? What are you hoping to get? And really kind of keep your assessments narrowed in and focus in on the objectives that you're looking to see if students have mastered. Are there any trade-offs to auto-scored online assessment? I think one thing that I loved when we got, we're a Canvas LMS user in our district, and one thing I loved when we got Canvas was the ability to have anything that was multiple choice auto-scored for me, and that was absolutely amazing and life-changing. And there are definitely times when that is appropriate and good, but we don't want to always be, you know, assessing A, B, C, D, because you're leaving a lot of opportunity for guessing and all of those things. And so trying to think about blended learning, there's a lot of opportunity there, and you might be tempted to always do auto-scored. So think about broader ways, better ways to get a more authentic picture of what your students know. And so absolutely do some of the auto-scored online assessments for things that make sense with that. But don't always just rely on that. How will you assess anything that's project-based? So what kind of rubrics are you going to create? How will the students access those rubrics, and how are you going to convey on that rubric exactly what you're looking for in the project? Do students know how you're going to provide the feedback? Are they going to have an opportunity to redo portions that need to be redone? So these are just all things to think about as you move into this sort of model. How will you use formal and informal assessments in your blended environment? Are they going to all be online? Are you going to still do some face-to-face? Are you going to have a combination? And I'm kind of in the camp of a combination, especially when you're looking at things such as I mentioned before. If I'm a first grade teacher and I'm doing a fluency check, and I love being able to see video of my students, but there's something about having that student right beside me as they're reading, and it kind of changes the dynamic of that relationship, and really kind of seeing a lot of things that the student maybe they're not articulating, and so I wouldn't completely give up those face-to-face assessments as well. Go ahead, Mary. Thank you. Okay, so just a few more thoughts on blended learning assessment. I think the biggest thing, and this is true of just teaching in general, we have so many amazing tools at our fingertips these days. Tools, and we have access to more data than ever. I've been teaching for 14 years, and I think back to my first year of teaching, and it's just incredible what now I have available to me about my students and what they've mastered and what they're weak in, and can get very specific on skills. And really, none of that matters unless I'm looking at the data and I'm using it to inform my face-to-face interactions with my students. So, for example, in a station rotation or a flex station rotation, maybe my students are working, but when they get to me, when it's time for that small group with me, if I'm just prescribing exactly what I think they need, I'm probably doing some good there. But if I'm actually looking at the data from some of the assessments that they're completing, and I can individualize what that student actually needs, then that interaction becomes much better, and the students are actually getting what they need. So again, it's going back and taking the time to, if I've done a quiz something as simple as a quiz going back with the student and looking through the results and teaching the students, especially older students when I taught middle school, to go back and look at what they missed and come to me with their questions prepared. Hey, I'm still not sure I understand what this is. And really allowing them to take some ownership, and teaching them to look at their own data as well. Also, it's really important and now easier than ever to provide timely feedback and that intervention to the students. So if they participate in an assessment, that information is available to you immediately. You don't have to carry the papers home and grade them. You have it right there. And that's even true of a project. If my students do a project and I've put their rubric into Canvas so that they can access that, and I'm actually going to be able to score that right in Canvas or Google Classroom or whatever you use, then if I'm waiting 3 weeks to come back to that and finally get that graded, then I've lost 3 weeks of opportunity to really go back, because now we're 3 weeks later, their mind is not on that project that they did. So making sure that we're providing the feedback in a timely fashion and intervention. So ideally, what I liked to do when I was doing station rotation in my science classroom, particularly before we would have, we had common assessments that sixth grade as a whole would take. Before we would do that, the week of, we would do kind of a review through our rotations, and so I would be looking at what they exactly needed and adjusting each day to that instruction. So, just making sure that you're being timely with that. Use assessment tools that can adapt to the needs of the student when possible. So this means, again, because of technology, we have things like Newsela, or even little kids, we have reading eggs, and we can adjust that to their needs. So if they're reading Newsela, I can adjust the lexile level of that text that they're engaging with, and making sure that it's exactly what they need. But beyond that, making sure too, we can turn on read aloud features, and we can change the colors of screens if we need to make it more readable, and all of those good things that we know about, and making things accessible. And again, just making sure that it is for all of your learners. And this seems pretty basic, but stay focused on the learning objective. If I'm doing an assessment, I don't want to capture 5 different objectives. I want to really focus in on what's the objective that I wanted them to get out of this particular activity or lesson or station that they're engaging with, and keeping it really narrow. That way I know exactly what I need to target. All right, Mary, I'm like speed. I'm on fire right now. I got 10 minutes and I can do it. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some assessment tools that can make tracking your students' progress towards goals a snap. I'm going to share a lot of tools. They're going to be on the screen. We'll certainly not talk about each one in depth. I might highlight a few. But just so you can see, I've broken this down into different types of assessment. And all of these, you wouldn't use them all in a week. You wouldn't use them all in a month. But they're just different things that you can use in different methods. So before we do that, I just want to make sure if you do have a learning management system, to really max out that power. A lot of your LMSs have built-in formative assessments. They have discussions that students can participate in, which is a really great way for them to discuss what they've learned or share thoughts on a topic. Quizzes, of course. Some learning management systems have where students can even create wikis or blogs. And then, of course, anything that they can submit, you can write some feedback on and get back to the student in a timely fashion. Instant feedback, I know in Canvas, I can give video feedback, audio feedback. I can, give them written comments. I can annotate on top of their work. And I can do all of that inside of our LMS, and I know in a lot of other LMSs as well. And then global feedback. So especially when it comes to a wiki or a blog or a discussion, not only are you seeing it, but their entire peer group is seeing that. And that's kind of powerful too. So I think really, and I think the next slide is just saying mix it up, use a mixed bag of assessments to keep learning and feedback fresh. I know that teaching 6th grade, by the time they got to me, if I made them do one more Kahoot, they probably would have thrown me out of the classroom because they had done it over and over and over again in elementary school, which is great. That makes me really happy. But I like to mix things up and keep it kind of fresh. We have a few things that we keep running throughout the school year, but every now and then I will mix up an assessment during a station, so it's not always a Google form, it's not always a quizzes, and we mix it up. All right, let's see. I think the next one is, we're going to start looking at some types of assessment tools. Interactive exit notes. So an exit note is a great way in your blended environment to be able to gauge the kind of the temperature of where students are. And used to, I would have them literally write them on sticky notes and slap them on the wall as they walked out of the room. And, honestly, students still like to do that. So, and I also had a spark board in my room where they could write things on the dry erase board. But here's some exit note tools that are digital. Padlet, of course, has been around forever. Google Forms has just continue to add things over the years, and you don't have to make them really lengthy. I think that when you're thinking exit note, you're thinking something short, something sweet, something that will tell you what they got or what they didn't. So a lot of times I would have students tell me one thing that you feel like you got really well, tell me one thing that you feel like tomorrow you need to spend some more time on. And then that would allow me to kind of adjust things for a class or station that might need to be switched out. Clickers is another one. If you have HyperDocs, you can always link that in, or just a shared slide doc. My students love doing that. I might just start a link slide doc for a class and say, you've got slide 14 or you've got slide 12, and that's your slide for the week. And I will tell them, hey, today I want you to write. Tell me one thing that, didn't go well today. So just some little exit notes, and that's just a good little bit of communication with your students as well. And social media, especially high school teachers, some are using things like Snapchat or Twitter to have students do some exit notes like that, and that's definitely a preference thing, but completely up to you. I also use Flipgrid as exit notes from time to time. I put it somewhere else, but I also would use that in that way. Programs definitely have a place in a blended environment because these programs, often research-based, and they allow students to engage with lots of quality practice. And often that practice is targeted exactly to the level that they need. For example, our school, we are an NWEA benchmarking school, and our NWEA actually coordinates with Study Island and creates learning pathways. And those pathways are created based upon exactly what they did well and what they struggled in on the NWEA benchmark test, which is kind of nice, except for the fact that sometimes these programs, and this is my caution, never replace a program or never replace yourself with a program. You have value. You can interact with students, and programs cannot interact two ways. So make sure that you're not losing sight of where their place is in the classroom, but certainly things like Dreambox and Khan Academy that already have things created. We don't always have to recreate the wheel. We have tools at our in our pockets, especially if your school is like mine and we have access to so many programs. I can't keep up with them. Station rotation, and just this really doesn't fit necessarily with assessment, except that if I want to assess what students were completing during stations, I would keep all that managed in one spot. So either HyperDoc, I like to use, we are an Apple distinguished school, and I'm an Apple teacher. So I use the Numbers app, which sounds really weird. I use that as my station rotation, and it doesn't look like a spreadsheet. It looks completely different, but it segments things out, and students can leave their work in there, and I can import video, anything into that. Ebooks, Book Creator, I used to do that in first grade. Their station rotations were all located in Book Creator, so I would put my videos in there that would instruct them what to do at each station, and they would submit their work in there. And then I had one thing that was turned in at the end of the week versus, 50 things throughout the week. And then modules like in Canvas. All right, go ahead. I'm trying. 2 minutes. Okay, so gamified, of course, there are so many different ways to get information from your students, like quizzes. And quizzes, what I love about it is I would put a game out there, I think it's called Homework, and you don't have to use it like homework, but I would put that out on a Monday, and students could interact with that all week, and they could retake it over and over and over again. And so they could see each day if they were getting better and what they were still needing to work on. Quizlet, of course, Quizlet Live, if you had some small groups, you could have them competing against each other with Quizlet Live. Kahoot, Socrative. I used to use Socrative a lot when I taught social studies, and there's some gamification in there as well. GoFormative, and then Edpuzzle. So what Di was trying to get at, in Edpuzzle, you can upload your own video content or pull from their library or YouTube. And what that does is if they're at a station or they're at a rotation, they can pull that video up and you can create questions along the way. So the video might play for 30 seconds and then it stops, and they have to answer a question before the video can progress anymore, and they have to get that correct. So that will tell you, and it gives them accountability as well, that they're actually watching the video, they're interacting with the video, they're getting what you wanted from the video. So Edpuzzle is a really great one for that. And then, of course, social and discussion-based assessment, Flipgrid. Oh my gosh, my students love Flipgrid so much. LMS, discussion, blogging, and going back to social media. So just really, I like to mix it up. I think that is all of them that I got through. We're right at 5 o'clock. Yay, we've got this. You've got this. And I know that blended learning, sometimes that word gets thrown around, and it's not always what it is, but just know that you can start small and you can work your way to a fully blended learning environment, or you can keep it contained to a subject area. But that's where I started. I started with reading, and I blended my reading instruction, and I felt like it was a better way to reach more students at their level. All right, I think I've got it, Mary.
That was a fast hour.
That was so fast.
There's so much great information, and we, and I think Diana and Tiffany and I talked about this as we were planning this webinar, that they both had a full hour of information that they could have shared. So as we move forward, if you all who are listening to us today, who joined us, or those of you who listen to this recording, if you want to learn more about either of these topics, you can definitely contact Diana or Tiffany or me. I'm going to put my email address in here also, and I will get you in contact with the right person. But we can cover these topics again in a webinar in more detail. So we can look at doing that in the future. But for now, we want to be respectful of everybody's time and let you all go. And we are just really happy that you all joined us today. As I said, we have been recording this. As long as the technology has been happy today, I will have that posted hopefully early next week and available for you all to either listen to again, to review, or share it with a coworker who you think might be interested. So thank you very much. Be sure to follow us on Twitter or on Facebook if that is your chosen mode of communication, and we are definitely sharing other opportunities as they come along. But enjoy your evening tonight, and we hope to see you in a Twitter chat or a webinar soon. And thanks to Diana and Tiffany for all the great information. Everybody have a great night.